Hello and welcome to Is This England, a show where we talk about old England games and ask just how England was this.
Today, we're venturing back to the good old days of the 80s when men were men and the home championships were abolished. So, Scotland and England need a reason to keep playing each other. Enter the Rous Cup. Can I do that again? Just because I think there's a noise outside.
Yeah, I couldn't hear it, but feel free.
All right, let me just try that again because I'm pretty sure it's a bin man and I'll probably just close that window in a minute and die. Today, we're venturing back to the good old days of the 80s when men were men and the home championships were abolished. So, Scotland and England need a reason to keep playing each other. Enter the Rous Cup.
You may be a stranger, that's what time can do. Baby, you mean everything to me. Darling, there's no danger.
Never did I think that we would be celebrating the end of the home nations championships. It felt like a nice bonding point when we started the pod. We were both kind of fans, but here we are analysing its death.
Here, right at the end of it, before it's even started, I don't even think we've officially covered a home championships game, have we?
You're kidding.
I don't. I feel
No.
like we've done it. We've done a couple of England Scotlands. One with two of those games we never want to talk about again, and they were qualifiers for Euros.
Like
And
The
I
Keegan ones.
The Keegan one, and I think one of the first ones we ever did was that Scotland beating the world champions England. That may have been a home championships game, actually. Thinking about it, that may have been the one we've done, maybe the one of the more notable ones, anyway.
Well, I'm trying to place where we are in terms of the current landscape because the reason for doing this is, well, not the reason. The reason's because we enjoy it, but the hook, the link to modern society is that England play Scotland on Tuesday. It's currently Saturday morning, 9:48 p.m. a.m. And I am hungover, as you can tell by the errors and the waffling. So yeah, Scotland versus England coming up. Nick has dived back into the past and found a really unique little story, which we're going to pull the thread of today. But before we get there, we're going to place ourselves in time in the year 1985, which is when the game we're looking at today takes place. And Nick, you have a time capsule for us. I'll be doing mine on the next edition because we think this is going to be a odyssey, so to speak.
We
Yes,
only
that's
deal in
correct.
odysseys now.
1985. What do you got?
Yeah, in general, the 80s is a period I have not a lot of love for. It seems to be quite fetishized by a lot of people and for different reasons, probably just because they were young. But it's one of the biggest things that's not in my thing. I just thought it's not something I'm ever into. I mean, the year we're looking at, 1985, there are some good things that happened in 1985. Live Aid, the Super Mario Brothers game, Back to the Future. So, there's a lot of stuff I just don't get that's around this
Yeah.
period too. You've got things like The Goonies, The Breakfast Club, Teen Wolf. I've never seen any of those things, but they were kind of the standout films of this year.
Yeah.
Madonna, REO Speedwagon, and Phil Collins, absolute dreck. Were kind of the biggest acts of the time
You leave
as
Phil
well.
Collins alone. You leave
And
him alone, boy.
okay, yeah, okay. And there was also a thing called New Coke, which apparently was incredibly unpopular.
I think I may have read about that before. And anyway, just my take on everything you've just said, really. The 80s, yeah, I think growing up, it was like, oh, the 80s is naff, isn't it? You know, and I think maybe that's because it was kind of so into Oasis and because they're like 90s
Yeah,
and what have you, they were very much just like rejecting the decade previous. I don't feel particularly strongly about it, but I think it's just really unique. I feel like there's a continuation from the 60s into the 70s. And then even you could almost say from the 70s to the 90s.
mm,
The 80s in the middle of it seems a bit like they tried to do like a hard reset on culture, especially with like music and films and things like that. And it didn't quite pay off. But I feel like there's a lot of nostalgia for it today, like you say. I think the common mistake when assessing the decade is maybe saying, "Oh, it's the best decade ever," or just going, "Oh,
Yeah.
fuck it off." So you've kind of landed in the middle there. A couple of things you like.
We're really in that period now with culture where like so many people are just like, weren't the 90s great?
Yeah.
And it was
So
essentially just the last time you could just get away with everything,
yeah,
which is
yeah,
pretty much what everyone agrees, and then goes, oh, yeah, actually, I had a great time in the 90s, because I guess it's a lot of people of it's like the generation above us are now kind of the prominent like keepers of culture for that kind of thing, in terms of like, this is my story of the 90s and this is what we did. Well, our generation is going to be that next one, but I don't feel like there's any love for 2000s and 2010s. Like, you don't get 2010s bars, you know what I mean?
Oh, that'll be coming. Although maybe not, to be fair, because it's
Is there
just
a 2000s bar? I don't feel like that's a thing. Maybe I'm just missing something out, but yeah, it doesn't, it feels like those were kind of like the last big, you were one thing or the other, you had culture, and there was a time and a place for you, where after a period it all just, everything kind of blurs into one. When you get
yeah,
into people what they enjoy, like everyone likes a varied kind of music. You weren't just, I like goth music, that's the end. Like,
yeah. We
you
just
don't
like
get that
being
much
on
as
our
anymore.
phones as well. That's the main thing, is we all like just being on our phones, and it's not really.
It is great though, isn't
It is great, but
it?
you're not gonna have much footage to show in the future about like what we were like, because it's just people in the front rooms on the phones going, "Oh, remember that? Remember sitting there on
Although
TikTok?"
everyone does film everything now, so there's
Yeah,
a lot
that's
of
true. There
there's
is
a
a
lot
lot
of
of
footage
actual
out there for
footage.
that. Yeah, but
Just
again, it's just other people on their phones.
one more thing we've spoke about before is like decades bleeding into each other.
Hmm.
So I was looking to try and find like best films of the 80s, and quite a lot of them were from the year 1980. I think it's quite telling.
Okay.
The top three films of the year 1980, according to a list on Collider.com. Number one is The Empire Strikes Back.
Mhm.
Number two is The Shining, and number three is Raging Bull. So you can kind of see the last embers of the 70s there before we get into the sort of I don't know, the kind of films we know as 80s films.
Yeah, like I say, your Goonies, your Breakfast Clubs, they came out in the year we're talking about here, and and I found an absolutely mental film I'd never heard about this year as well. It was called Legend, and it was directed by Ridley Scott, starring Tom Cruise, and Tim Curry played the devil. I
Yeah.
mean, just
I think he'd
what
make a
on
good
earth is
devil.
going on?
I think he'd
Well,
make a
yeah, I
good
mean, when you
devil.
think about Tim Curry, like an incredibly like flamboyant actor, you'd probably
Yeah.
say, and amazing in so many of his roles, but I'd never heard of that at all. But that is not going in the time capsule. What is going in the time capsule today is the film Brewster's Millions.
Love it. That's a classic film. Classic film. I know you're a
Brilliant,
big
brilliant.
Richard Pryor fan.
Yeah, yeah, it was the first time I'd ever seen Richard Pryor in a film, I want to say, and the same with John Candy. I mean, the two of the best comic actors ever, you'd probably say. For people who don't know, Richard Pryor plays a washed-up baseball player who finds out an elderly relative has passed away and given him an ultimatum. He can either take $1 million or has to try and spend $10 million in 30 days, meaning he will get the $100 million prize at the end. So a lot of admin,
Yeah.
a
A
lot of
lot of
admin
admin.
involved. Yeah,
I
and there's
mean,
and there
if it were to happen today, he could just buy a League One striker
yeah,
for his
yeah.
local team, his local League One team.
Well, I'm amazed really that there's never been a remake of this, and maybe it's because what is the value of money? The equivalent, is it a billion?
Yeah.
Is it getting left like a billion? And also it'd be like, okay, well, where did he get that billion? Like, it's all horrible, dirty money. Like, this was just old man leaves other person money
It's a
kind of
remake of
film.
a remake, though, isn't it? I feel like it's been done a few times in the past, the
Well,
film.
it was originally it was a 1940s film that was remade in the 80s. And like I say, I'm amazed because it's quite a well-known film. I'm just stunned that it's not been done in since, for all the films that get remade these days, and are loved and kind of sometimes replace the one that previously. This is the most known version of this one. I'm just amazed no one's taken a stab at it in
Well,
the modern day.
I was just looking on where am IMDb. They were looking at making one. In 2009, it was reported that Warner Brothers was moving forward with another version. Um, Variety reported that Robert Townsend had signed on to direct. Robert Townsend, who famously directed a film called Baps. And that's it. And that is
Great.
all that is all that there is about it. It is such a
That's happy that didn't happen then.
yeah. It's oh, there's another article here saying it's the most remade movie of all time as well. Adapted into film in 1914, 1921, 1926, 1945, and 1985. So I think the first few were just trying tweaks of the previous version before the one in the 40s.
Yeah,
With
like they've
some
just not got it right quite. And it's like, well, I wanted to make that. Okay, you can make that. You can just do it again. Like they just threw money around like no one's business. But
like Brewster himself or whatever his
like
character's
Bruce,
name is.
yeah, Monty Brewster is his name in the film. There is a catch, obviously, with all these kind of things as well in the film that he can't actually tell anybody why he's spending the money, and he also can't donate too much. He can't destroy it, and he has to account for every single penny by the end of it. And sounds easy.
A lot of
Who wouldn't
admin,
love?
like you
Yeah,
say.
yeah, a lot of admin, but who wouldn't like to try and have a go at spending that kind of money? But he does things like investing in an iceberg company,
Yeah,
which
what
quadruples in value.
sorry, but what does an iceberg company do? I have
It's
seen the
very
film, I just can't remember.
from memory. He like someone says, yeah, there's so much ice in like the polar ice caps. They just wanted to take like a boat, put a boat inside the ice cap, and then transport it back to America to sell as ice.
Bloody hell.
I know. Again, it sounds awful, but within the film, it quadruples in value. Like it just works. So he's just
Yeah.
like, shit, I'm back to where I started. He does things like he posts the most valuable stamp in the world.
Mm.
And he also runs for mayor and he ends up streaking ahead in the polls as well. So kind of everything he tries to do to spend the money kind of ends up working for him. And it's the worst situation for him. And again, he can't tell anybody. And it's just a fantastic film. Like again, the cast is really good with Candy and Pryor and just lots of other people in the 80s. You go, I've seen him, I've seen her in stuff. What are they in? And
Yeah.
it's great. And it's definitely a thing I'm like, yep, 1985, good in my books now.
Very good stuff. Let's go back to the football then, really, instead of all this baseball chat. So a little bit extra recap really as to why we're covering this game. So back in November of last year, it was announced that Scotland and England would play a special 150th anniversary heritage match on 12th of September 2023, aka Tuesday. That game is going to be played at Hampton Park, which should be great. And it's to commemorate the foundation of the Scottish FA. So we look back through this storied rivalry. We could have picked great football matches. I'm sure there's been one or two. We could have picked incredibly violent and bloody affairs. We could have picked high stakes games. We could have picked tournament matches with great goals. But we wanted to go for something a bit strange. So yeah, this period we're going to cover is strange. Nick, I'll pass over to you to give us a bit of a rundown on the state of football at the time.
Yeah, the state of football is that the home championships have been scrapped. Oh no, this is
Oh
the end
no.
already. Bye everyone. That's the end. Home championships are gone.
Ah, why scrap them? Why scrap them?
Well, we will get into why, but it feels weird, like I say at the start. It's something we've got such a fondness for, and neither of us were born when they were around. Like, why did we like them? Is it just because it's something we don't have, and we think
I,
it's actually quite fun to play, like a Scotland, a Wales, that kind of
yeah,
thing, quite regularly?
I think we don't have it, like you say, and we like to watch a lot of football,
Hmm.
but sometimes the England games can be a bit boring. So it
Hmm.
would be like England with stakes every year and fairly competitive games, rather
Yeah.
than watching England v Georgia or Armenia or what have you every. And there's 2 or 3 England games a year, aren't there? When you're like, I'm not even going to bother.
At least, yeah. And I think as well, it's because there is that quite local rivalry, which is just something that we've not really grown up with Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and Ireland to a greater extent as well. There are so few games that actually happen between the sides, unless it's like accidentally at a tournament. We've had Wales
Yeah,
recently, we had Scotland. It feels like there's going to be narrative no matter what that goes on with those now. But I guess there was always a tournament that made sense and people had a fondness for with that. But
yeah. I think it is just a good idea that makes sense.
yeah, I think so. And the home championships themselves actually included the first official international association football match. So
The invention of
really, it's this.
football.
Yeah, it's the start of football, really. When we like international football, which is crazy, which is between England and Scotland. The Scottish Football Association was created just so they could play and try to beat England. So their entire existence is in spite of England, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah, a spite FA, a spite national team. Larry David
Yeah.
would be proud.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, there had been games between Scottish and English teams before, mostly consisting of an English team and a team of Scottish players who lived in England between 1870 and 71. I could be getting that wrong quite a lot as we go along.
Yeah.
We are going back to the 1800s here with this. So, England being undefeated across the 5 games where an
So
English and Scottish team played each other.
that's crazy. So an English team and a team of Scottish players who lived in England.
Yeah, that's pretty much that's what I'm trying to say. It's not Scotland v England. It's kind of there are English players and there are players who are Scottish who lived in England who made up the Scotland team. So no
That's
one
so
had actually
weird.
lived in Scotland at that point.
Could they not
And
be asked to go up and check if anyone in Scotland fancied a kick?
well, this was kind of the problem, really. This is the issue that they had, where word got back to Scotland about this, about that England were hosting basically a fake game with no what
Yeah.
they would consider real Scottish people in it, and they weren't happy that they thought they weren't being represented correctly, and they weren't
Who would
having.
they even tell?
Well,
Just
this
the
is what
first Scottish man they see. You there? Spread the word. Your
Scottish
boys got
man.
whooped.
What day is this? Yeah, the games have been organised by a guy called Charles William Alcock, who was a sports administrator, and he was also a major force behind the creation of international cricket and was the creator of the FA Cup. So
Oh.
on the side, he's also just putting on these little friendly games where England are just beating the Scottish team. Again, it's like the Scottish player. I can't actually say Scotland at this point. Alcock then wrote in the Scottish newspaper, The Scotsman, that the invitation had been open to every Scotchman, which he wrote in italics, whether they were based north or south of the Tweed, and said the fault in the Scottish team lies in the heads of the players of the north, not on the management. So he's basically just saying it's all your fault. You didn't want to play, and even though they've never heard of the game so far, so already he's winding people up, and he's taking this article out in the Scotsman to slag them off. Basically, is like, come and get some.
It's a call out, isn't it?
It's
Yeah.
definitely a call out. I think he's just going. Well, we've done everything above board here. So what's your problem? This is clearly a fine game. If you want to come and play, then they're ever going to venture this far down, but they
Yeah.
do.
They've laid the bait. They've laid the bait and they've bit.
I know, yeah. Yeah, Alcock issued a challenge to those who lived in Scotland to play an 11-a-side game in the north of England, so kind of like a middle territory there. But Scotland weren't to bring too many players, as it would be against the associate rules.
What does again? What there's a lot of basics that we take for granted, not really adding up here. What do they mean? You can't
So
bring too many players.
I
That should be a given.
I think so, yeah. I think he's trying to just invent rules as he's going along here. And I don't know what these games were like. It's quite hard to obviously find details from 1800s football, but I think they would go, oh yeah, you can't bring too many players down because you'll cheat. And so I think he took for granted that they didn't know how many players would play football like in a game. And obviously he's pissed off a lot of Scotland, none more than Scotland's oldest football club, Queen's Park,
Right.
and who answered his challenge and set up a game on the 30th of November, St Andrew's Day, and would be played at West of Scotland Cricket's club ground in Patrick. So the game is set in Scotland still. So
What are these? This is irrelevant for the listener, but these images that we've got on the notes, these
I'll definitely be
droppings,
sharing them. Definitely.
are they supposed to represent this game, or are they just like old football sketches?
So on the day of the game, there was sketchings taken of the game as it took place, and
Yeah.
again we'll share these, but they are proper like what you'd imagine. A lot of these being shared down like, oh, this was like the picture of Gianelli on the day when like the plague was going through. It was just lots of like plague imagery. It feels like.
Jesus. So is this is the first? No, this isn't. the game
This
that's the
is
first recognised game, is it?
so this is the first recognised game between England and Scotland, which was the first ever international fixture that took place between any teams, basically, because these were just the ones that wanted to start playing each other officially.
Right. Okay.
Just through pure spite and hatred, as we said. The match itself ended 0-0 and is seen as the first ever international fixture. England and Scotland played each other again the following year, this time at the Oval in London, with England winning 4-2 before Scotland finally scored their first win over England, winning 2-1 at Hamilton in 1874.
So a bit of tit for tat. I just want to take a second, really, to think about this Charles William Alcock, who
Mm.
set up the game by like golding the Scots, and then it turned into the first recognised game. I mean, we're laughing because of all the madness of people not really having clear rules, and it's all just a bit crazy. But who could have thought then, when he set up this match, to basically set up a fight with Scotland? I feel like they did it so they could fight afterwards. Who would have thought it would turn into this like the biggest thing in the world, where so
Yeah.
much money is made, and it's like hundreds of thousands of people, if not, well, probably definitely millions a week go to games.
I think this was, there were football clubs
Yeah,
beforehand. I think that this is the difference of, actually, we've got a set of players from us who will fight a set of players from them, and it essentially is probably still a fight at this point. Who knows? But I think that is the thing of, this is, way before the World Cup is
yeah,
invented, and all this. So there are football clubs around, but I agree, kind of to have the administration side of growing the game and giving and
yeah.
sending it and giving it to everyone, kind of, at this point. And again, it's England. England didn't invent football; they just kind of were the ones to administrate it more.
Just get it organized.
Yeah, just kind of get it organised a bit more. And from kind of England and Scotland starting to play each other a bit more in 1876, the Welsh hear about this, and the Welsh want in on it. They
I
want in on
think
this rivalry.
I think Alcock knew what he was doing there.
Oh yeah.
I think he wanted the Welsh more than the Scots, but he needed to use them as a bit of, again, bait.
Yeah, I don't think he took out an advert in the Welsh magazine.
Now, but it markets itself by that point.
Oh yeah, definitely. And they wanted a piece of the action too. So Wales are added to play Scotland in 1876, and then in 1879 they then play England. So Scotland and Wales play each other before England play Wales.
Yeah, well, again, you got to assert your dominance, haven't you? Earn it,
Yeah. Well,
earn
that's the
it.
thing, and with all this, like, they all start playing each other, and there's these round robin games, and it all gets a bit messy. But all the teams would play on how we're going to do it. So they decided to turn it into an official home championships. So
Cool.
along with that, now this is 1884, it was agreed that each team would play each other once, and whoever amassed enough points across the 3 games would win the tournament.
I love just the arrogance almost of calling it the home championships. Well, where's it being played? Home. I mean, home could be anywhere. Yeah, but this is real home. Real home. When the
I know.
world wants to play, they can think of a name for whatever their cup may be. But this is the home championships. They should do a film about it, like the FIFA one about the invention of the World Cup.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the thing that they could do. It's just like, I would
Benedict
I would like to
Cumberbatch's
see that.
Alcock.
Oh yeah, in my head though, it is just like, whenever I'm seeing this, I just think Braveheart. I don't know why. I've just still got it around in my head. But by this time that the home championships has been born and risen, Northern Ireland are involved at this point as well, or just Ireland as it was at that point too.
Yeah.
And yeah, when the first load of games come round, fittingly Scotland win the inaugural tournament with a 1-0 win over England in Glasgow, being their crowning achievement and the kind of like the whole point of the tournament,
Yeah,
because it's them who have the big rivalry. It's fitting that they beat England to win the first one.
it's like in wrestling terminology, England have put Scotland over. You
Yeah.
know, we've got them up to our level and then let them surpass us.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. And again, it's kind of the whole point of this, is because they've been playing each other for so long. They are the 2 best teams in this home championships, as Wales and Ireland lost all their games heavily to England and Scotland. So they're not quite there at this point yet either, but it's Scotland and England, which is the headline here, that as we go along.
Yeah, as it should be.
Yeah,
I might delete
absolutely.
that bit.
Over the years, the home championships took on even more importance as they became qualification groups for a team to progress to the newly forming World Cup and European Championships, starting in 1949. So these games now had even more importance because if you win the home championships, you get to go to the World Cup.
Wow. That's crazy. I mean, come on, get England and Scotland in the world. Oh no, I don't know the reasons why, but I know that England weren't part of the original couple of World Cups. But
Yeah.
they've proved their credentials. They've set up their own little tournament. They've been dominating it. Get them in there.
Maybe
But yeah,
Alcott just went over and set up all the other ones a lot better. Maybe
yeah,
he just did that.
took out an advert in the Uruguayan Post.
Yeah.
You lot of
This would
slugs.
this would stop once major tournaments started expanding a bit more as well. Once they open up to more than, I don't know, what is it, 4 or 8 teams right at the start, and everyone in the home championships wanted a fairer chance of being able to represent themselves at a tournament. So
Yeah, so
you
it's
would have a
England are kind of
few,
saying like we'll qualify, but we pick our qualifying
yeah.
groups, and it's teams that we know we smash and only have to travel 2 hours to get to.
Yeah, exactly. And I think after that as well, it was like, well, if Scotland and England are both getting quite good, it feels unfair that only one of them gets to go to a World Cup. And again, you see with Wales, I think when we did a Wales episode a while ago, we talked about them and when they first went to a World Cup. You had Northern Ireland, who we'll come on to shortly about their success as well around this period. But the competition would run from 1884 for 100 years before being
Wow.
cancelled, which is amazing, really, that it was bang on 100 years,
Yeah.
and they went, "Yeah, that's enough now. Let's
We've given it
celebrate
100
this."
years. Fair
Yeah,
crack of the whip.
let's celebrate this by killing it.
Yeah.
It's just quite strange. So the reasons for cancellation were due to fixture congestion, better competitions to be played elsewhere, the troubles in Northern Ireland, which caused a stop to the 1980-81 edition to the tournament, low attendances, and the rise of hooliganism. So it was seen as we've all had our fun, but
Yeah.
this it's not fit for purpose anymore. This tournament.
Yeah, the world it's literally almost like the world has changed.
Yeah, and then
Especially the world of football.
this needs to change with it when that's kind of like the official reasons that were given. But England were seen to be wanting to play stronger teams on a more consistent basis because they didn't feel that they were getting enough from this. So they would withdraw from the 1983-84 edition, which Scotland immediately said they would do as well. So England's
Yeah.
resignation went in, and then literally as soon as Scotland knew about it, they were like, "Well, we're going out as well."
We're closer than you think. Just a thought on what we were talking about earlier. Why do we long for home nations championships? I mean, you said there England wanting to play stronger teams. I think a home nations tournament would be pretty competitive. Actually, would it? Would England just? I don't know. Would you think it'd be interesting and you'd get different winners over the course of maybe 4 or 5 years if we did it now?
I'd like to think so, yeah, because like I say, as we record this, Scotland are kind of a bit on the rise and look like they are going to be able to go to the European Championships for like a second tournament in a row for them. I know they didn't go to the World Cup, but this is like a second go at it. Wales obviously went to the last World Cup. I'm not entirely sure how they're doing in qualification. Northern Ireland have kind of seemingly had their little golden spark and regeneration and have missed out on the qualifying for the Euros, which seems quite difficult. You obviously wouldn't get the Republic of Ireland team in this, which I still kind of think like if we want to build footballing relationships and relationships in general with countries such as Ireland, then I think it's a good thing to play them more. It's still way more interesting.
Yeah, yeah. To be honest, I would. Yeah, I'd like to have seen Republic in there as well, but I understand.
There's
I
reasons for
understand the
that they're
reasons
not
why
there.
not. And let's just put a full stop on that little
Yes.
tangent. Back to you then, Nick. Where are we?
Yeah, so we're in the final edition of the tournament. So the final winners of the championships were Northern Ireland, which
Bloody hell!
which again kind of fitting that
Yeah.
neither Scotland nor England were able to kind of like
Again,
boast to being the final ones.
they were the last ones in it as well, weren't they?
Yeah,
So they,
yes,
they were in theory almost the baby, the weakest of the group, and have risen over time to be put over.
Yeah, final winners of the championships. They'd had a brilliant team around this period as well. They made their first World Cup appearance in 1982 and beat the host Spain during their stay in the tournament as well. I think it was a Norman Whiteside goal, and one of probably the defining moment in Northern Ireland's football history. That is going to their first ever World Cup and beating the hosts. Just an
Yeah,
amazing achievement, really.
definitely.
From looking at the final table, you can see why no one cared about the tournament anymore, though. You can see why it needed kind of shooting in the head, with every team finishing with one win, one draw, and one loss. But Northern Ireland finished with the best goal difference of +1. Very funny.
Lol.
And thanks to their 2-0 win over Scotland in their opening game. So, kind of, it's that bad at this point. Their opening game was the 2-0 win over Scotland. They drew the next one, lost the next one, and they still won the tournament.
Yeah, that's pretty rough, isn't it? There.
Yeah, that is totally sleepwalking your way to the trophy. But, so a really tight tournament. But with 11 goals scored across the 6 games, it was time to shoot this old boy in the head and just be done with it, really.
Yeah, take it out back and put it out of its misery.
I do quite like the idea of this happening every 100 years.
Yeah,
Like it just, once the incantation begins to raise the home championships from the ground, it cannot be undone for another 100 years. Like it's just like, well, this has to happen now. It's like Ghostbusters or something.
yeah. So like, it's just written in a scripture. Whoever's England manager in 60 years finds this dusty old book. I think it's been
Yeah,
about 40 years, hasn't it, since it's done? So in another
yeah,
60, who would be England manager? Jude Bellingham,
yeah. Probably. Why not? Let's give Jude the job. Let's go for it. But
and he's in the Hodgson era of his life by that point as well.
I,
We really need to get over Bellingham as manager.
he's done so much for us when he won us those 4 World Cups, but it's time to go.
Yeah.
I
Um,
love the idea of Bellingham, like it was like the Mummy or something, just opening up. What's this?
yeah.
And this book opens up, and he's like, "Don't read from the book."
I could see that again. That would be a good film. The
That's the
sequel.
film I want. The Mummy remake with Jude Bellingham reading from reading from an old match day program of the whole home championships.
So we've killed the home championships. It may rise again in another 60 years, but we do have an opportunity to look at the birth of the Rous Cup now.
Yep, so we move on to the birth of the Rous Cup because, without the home championships around, what were England and Scotland supposed to do when they fancied, kicking shit out of each other? They just couldn't carry on living next to each other and not playing football at this point. So they needed to do something new. They needed to invent the Rous Cup.
I think there's a lot of talk about the rules of football, that whenever there's a slight rule change, the whole world goes crazy. And in the
Hmm.
grand scheme of it, they are minor rule changes. We haven't seen
Yeah.
much that change. I think if there was ever a time when we were going to like adapt football so it would look a bit different, it would have been here. England and Scotland would have been like, we're going to invent a game that's crossed between football and boxing, and we're just going to do it once a year. I think they would have been up for it then, but alas, it didn't happen. We got the Rous Cup, unless that's what the Rous Cup is.
Well, it's funny when you think about that because it's like, as seen as the trendsetters and the inventors of international football, if they'd have just gone away and gone, when we play each other, we're going to do something you don't expect, and bring the boxing in, for example, like
Yeah.
they say, this would have been the time to do it because it would have been like, oh, what are England and Scotland cooking up in there? What are they doing in this mad lab that they've got? But all they invented was the Rous Cup. Named after Sir Stanley Rous, a former secretary of the Football Association and former president of FIFA. So he's had a little spell in there.
Is what was his form? Oh, so he's English.
Yes,
Sir Stanley.
of course. if we're gonna name a trophy, it's gonna be after a bloody Englishman.
I was gonna say Scotland are like, can't we have a say? And they go,
Have we
well,
no say in this?
name your person, because from what I remember, it was Charles William Alcock who got you lot together.
I was gonna say, do you want us to name it after Alcock? Because we'll do it.
The Alcock Cup.
The All Cup. Yeah, the trophy itself doesn't look like a traditional football trophy, as you'd kind of think. It's much more kind of like a rugby trophy.
Yeah, I think it look.
You see it.
Yeah, I think it looks like Wimbledon,
Yeah,
the men's Wimbledon trophy. I actually
yeah.
think.
It's like a big gold cup with like a lid on it, like the FA Cup. But it's quite FA Cup like, but it's gold with the handles are a bit smaller, and I feel like the base is a bit thinner as well. It looks so rugby to me. It's like some cauliflowered thug would lift it after 80 minutes of calling the ref master or something. I
You
just
had
don't
you had
care
to
for
get it
it.
in there. Had to get it in there, didn't you? You dig.
Yeah, that abysmal tournament starting again soon, isn't it? For the
It started yesterday, the Rugby World
oh,
Cup.
did it? Oh,
England play
they
tonight against Argentina.
yeah, that famous rugby nation. I'm sure. I'm sure that game's been on the calendar for about 9 years, as they organise this so ahead of time in their pools or whatever they do.
I think they're one of the Six Nations, Argentina. No, no, they're not.
Let's definitely not get into that.
Yeah, I don't know anything about rugby anyway. I'd
No,
like to wind you up.
yeah, it's a
Uh,
yeah, and it's quite shitty, really. England and Scotland in this period, they're basically going out behind Wales and Northern Ireland's back.
yeah,
So
it's a
they
weird one,
still
isn't
want to
it?
keep playing each other, but they just don't want to play Wales and Northern Ireland anymore, even though Northern Ireland won the last home championship. And I'm pretty sure Wales beat England in that.
It's a bit soon, and it's a bit obviously was always going to happen. So if this was like a
Yeah.
relationship and England or Scotland were my friend, I'd be like, just don't put anything on Facebook for a bit.
Yeah.
Just I think just make sure that you're both happy yourselves. But obviously, they've got to get out there and entertain the people.
It's a bit Succession as well, this, isn't it? Like something was clearly always brewing in the back. And like when something is breaking like this, like the resignations are already in the post.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's kind of like this is already happening, but don't worry, we'll carry on playing each other. Just don't let anybody know. And it kind of just gets announced. Like I reckon it's what like the people who were behind the Super League. I guess it's kind of like what they were trying to do. Of
yeah,
just like all
definitely.
this is going on. Don't worry about it. You're all gonna resign at the same time. Like guess what happened when the Premier League was invented as well.
Very true. But I, I don't know much about the Rous Cup, but I don't think it's going to be as successful as the Premier League as we look into it. And maybe not, even though the Super League hasn't happened yet, I would almost say I don't think it's going to be as important or as money making as that, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see how the Rous Cup gets on. No spoilers for what it's up to today, but we'll see. But yeah, it'll be decided the game would rotate venue each year, with Scotland taking the home game this time round in 1985, which is the one we're looking at, where we start our journey.
So
But
it's
before
like
we kind of
it's a one game thing
tournament, yeah,
for a cup. They've actually
yeah,
bothered to make a trophy for that.
they've made a full trophy. They've given it a name, and it's a one-off game once a year, and they will rotate where the game is played every year.
Okay, okay.
So we've got that, but before we kind of look at the game, I think it's important that we just kind of remember where England and Scotland are in this kind of little journey, where we find them and what they've been up to.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Other than the home nation stuff, which we've kind of covered, what else is
Yeah,
happening?
we've kind of mentioned that briefly. Yeah, we kind of look at first World Cup 1982. So England had qualified for their first major tournament in 8 years in Spain 82.
Yeah, 8 years, 8 years, man. I think we've covered a lot. I feel like we covered a lot of time where England weren't qualifying for tournaments, but just looking at this and thinking about what we've been doing recently with like McLaren, and I've
Mm,
looked back, we've done quite a lot of like modern day, this is what's happening with England right
yeah.
now podcasts. I do kind of long for an awful game where England aren't qualifying for tournaments for us to look back
The,
on with a shit pitch.
the Channon years,
The
basically.
the Channon years. Yeah.
Because that's what it is. It's that awful period. We kind of did the first one with the Poland game where they didn't qualify for the 1974 World Cup, I want to say, and then
Yeah.
there's a lot of bad stuff in between that as well, where we've touched briefly. But yeah, there's interesting games in there. It's just finding the ones that are watchable for us, so our minds don't just melt, isn't it? Really.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, England have done quite well at the 82 World Cup. They've done well to reach the second group stage. I mean, come on. Um, but they drew both those games 0-0 and went out in this before the semi-final stage. So they'd failed to progress through that second stage through drawing 0-0, but kind of like an all right showing for England, and seeing as maybe a little bit of a missed opportunity with the players that they had as well. You had kind of Brian Robson coming into his peak. Some of the forwards and defenders were there or thereabouts, and we're seeing the game today kind of like what's been left over from that period.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a bit of maybe a minor disappointment, but also they hadn't qualified for a tournament in so long. It's like when you're kind of higher up than you thought you would be, and you're like, whoa, I don't know what I'm doing here. You just like you
just
get there
just
and you're
just
like,
nice to have something on TV again, and to be following and supporting England again. If you just had that break, you're just happy to be there at that point, and like you're not thinking, God, we can go and win this. You kind of would go with no expectations, I'd imagine.
yeah, definitely, definitely.
And with that as well, Scotland also went to the 1982 World Cup, so it's quite rare for England and Scotland to both go to a tournament together. They
Mm,
usually end up playing each other, but still,
yeah.
unfortunately for them, they went out in the first round despite winning their opening game 5-2 against New Zealand. They must have thought they were well on for it at
Yeah. I
that.
mean, you were saying there about England and Scotland getting drawn together at tot. It does look like we're both going to be at Euro 24. You know, not trying to tempt fate or anything from Scotland's perspective. Would you like us to be drawn in a group together?
No, because
No.
they're just not going to be good games. We've already kind of had that recently, and I guess we had the Wales in the World Cup as well, which wasn't too far away. I'd kind of just like less narrative in my group stage, please, just to kind of get through. But that's impossible because there's always a narrative whoever England plays, isn't there?
Yeah.
It's just that's there's always a bit of history somewhere, even if you've probably never played a team before. It felt like there was history in the Senegal game at the
Yeah.
last World Cup, and England has literally, I don't think, ever played them.
No, I know. Crazy. That's its own bit of narrative, really. Um, but yeah, okay. You've put your flag to the mast there. You don't want Scotland in Euro 24.
No,
We'll
give us
see
a
when
bit.
those balls
Give us
get
a.
drawn. You'll be
Oh no, yeah,
excited.
that those ice cold Scotland balls. Yeah, Scotland in this group stage as well. They were brought back down to earth, losing 4-1 to a Brazilian team, which is so beloved for their attractive football. They're actually held in high regard at home than some of the teams who've actually won a World Cup for. And this was seen as like the last of like the proper Brazilian samba football.
Yeah, I think that's
And they were
probably fair.
Yeah, and they were like a hugely beloved team, really. Scotland could only draw their final game 2-2 with the Soviet Union, when only a win would do due to the Soviet Union's better goal difference. And Scotland exited the tournament post haste. So England and Scotland both out of the World Cup in 1982, putting in, respective showings for
Yeah,
themselves. Probably you'd probably say Scotland are quite unfortunate to be just put in with an incredible Brazil side, got smashed, and then that's essentially the reason they were knocked out.
yeah, yeah. A bit harsh, but yeah, both teams kind of showing giving a decent account of themselves, really.
Yeah, and then they kind of move on to Euro 84 qualification. So England set their sights on qualifying for two tournaments in a row, but will come up against an emerging but yet not yet fully formed Denmark team, who would go on to be one of the great international teams to never win a tournament.
Really, I've never thought about or heard about that. Really,
Yeah, they're a famous team. Well, this group never won a tournament. They would end up winning. Is it Euro 92?
92.
I think they win Euro 92, but by then, kind of that's not the Danish team who everyone remembers of Danish Dynamite. There's a book by Rob Smythe and Mike Gibbons who I have got an audio book. I'm just incapable of ever reading something. So, but it kind of covers this team, and it's like a hugely beloved team who played amazing football, but at this point, they're not quite at their big culty best yet. So
They're still
yeah, they're not.
cultivating.
Yeah, still brewing, still brewing. England had a new manager in the dugout around this period, though, one Bobbert Robson. So
Big
Robson's
Bobbert.
takeover. Yeah, he's come into it now. England started their qualification with a 2-2 draw in Copenhagen with 2 goals from the late Trevor Francis. They'd go unbeaten until the return game against the Danes, where a penalty condemned England to defeat. And despite winning their last 2 games, England finished 1 point behind Denmark and failed to qualify for Euro 84. So a disappointing first go for Robson there.
Definitely. Do you know where he'd come from at that point?
Not particularly. I think he probably would have been at Ipswich just before then, and I think he'd done well. I think he'd won like an FA Cup, and they'd done quite well. I think they'd won what was it called, the Fairs Cup around that time as well. I remember there's quite a few Ipswich players that end up playing for Robson around this time, and I think there was a few in when we covered one of the 82 games in the World Cup as well. So
Very
yeah,
good though. It was
it's the
Ipswich.
new one. Ah, there you are.
Well done, you. Well done, you.
Lovely old
Okay.
job.
So
And
disappointment for England then.
yeah, disappointment of not qualifying again. It's quite harsh because when we look today, it feels like there's loads of like parachutes. if an England-esque team aren't going to make a tournament, there seems to be loads of ways to get out of it through Nations League and second playoffs and other rounds or whatever. Here it's a lot harsher. One team goes from your group, that's it. And
Yeah.
Scotland would fail to qualify for Euro 84 as well. Scotland finished bottom of their group, containing Belgium, Switzerland, and East Germany, winning only one game. So neither team kind of in good shakes as we come towards the final home championships, which were won, as we said, by Northern Ireland. But as well, they both think they're too good for this.
England and Scotland.
England and Scotland think they're far too good for the kind of the aforementioned final home nations, where England would beat Northern Ireland at Wembley, they'd lose in Wales and draw at Hampden in the final ever home championships game. So a fitting death to the tournament, really. In there, it's just a draw at Hampden to end it all.
Yeah. Tony Woodcock with the goal for England. Mark McGee with the goal for Scotland. Luther Blissett played for England on that day.
There you go. There you go.
Played for AC Milan at the time.
Yeah, this was a strange period where these England players would still be playing they'd be playing abroad. I think when we touch next week, there's a lot of Italian mentions in there as well for kind of England players, which is quite interesting. But yeah, England not a very good team at the minute, but still getting moves abroad, which was like a new thing at that point.
Do you know who made their England debut in that last home nations game?
Go on.
Gary Lineker.
So there is something of note as the home championships die, Lineker lives.
Yeah, I was trying to because that great site we use, England Stats, which tells us these things. They always have sources for their records. There's an I can't find the article, but apparently the Guardian did an article on this game, and the headline was "Losing Touch with the Real World," which that you could say that's what England and Scotland are doing.
Yeah, kind of thinking they're too good for this when
Yeah.
in reality they're not winning their own tournaments, but they're still, again, it's just a lot of similar to football today, isn't it? It's just we know what's best for the people. We know what people actually want. People want England, Scotland, like around this period. So we're just going to give them just this, and it's so strange. But speaking of kind of like the money around it or whatever, what they thought there was, without a tournament to fill the rest of their summer, England did what they do best, and they go on a money spinning friendly tour while they're not at Euro 84.
Yeah, I never really thought of England as like a commercial prospect prior to doing the podcast, but I think definitely around this time we do see them, don't we? These strange money spinning tournaments.
I think as well, it's like brand England is becoming a thing for some reason. I don't really know why, but it's always England that get invited to these weird games, and we'll kind of touch on it next time because there's an even stranger bunch of games they go on. But England are still seen as like we're going to do a weird tournament for everyone. Let's get England involved.
Do you think it's
I don't think that happens anymore. Maybe there's no room for these weird tournaments anymore.
no, there definitely isn't. Yeah. Do you think maybe England were a big brand main because of the likes of, I imagine Liverpool were doing quite good around this time?
Yeah, you had obviously the club sides were doing really well. You had Forest, Villa, and Liverpool all winning European Cups in kind of like the late 70s, early 80s. So yeah, the club sides were doing very well as well. But it's just the England football team wasn't. I guess it's because they were just made of the best of British players played for those clubs, didn't they?
Just gonna say, I'm just looking at the this is 85, isn't it? The Rous Cup game.
Yeah.
85. The European Cup final that year was Juventus versus Liverpool. And it should be expected really, but the Liverpool team, 10 of the 11, come from Ireland, England, Scotland, and Wales.
Yeah.
Only the goalkeeper, Bruce Grobbelaar, who I didn't know was a Zimbabwean.
Yeah.
Huh. Why did I think he was Welsh in my head?
Are you thinking of Neville Southall?
I probably am, yeah. Sorry, everyone.
You're thinking of Big Nev, but
yeah.
England start on this friendly tour. It doesn't go well. They lose their home game of this weird tour to the USSR 2-0 at Wembley, before jetting off for a South American adventure.
Yeah, that usually spells danger to me.
Disaster, I'd say that spells. Yeah. Their last big tour of South America hadn't gone well. Don Revy had been sacked for not wanting to keep his job anymore last time they did that. Where
That's a good
again,
reason to get sacked.
yeah, I think that's one we're definitely going to cover at some point. But we just need to get around to like having to think about it. But it really hadn't gone well. That was seen as like a warm up for a World Cup. I
Mm.
don't think he even qualified for it, but then he just wasn't interested in keeping his job anymore and wanted to go elsewhere for more money. However, this time England had one of their greatest nights ever by winning in the Maracanã against Brazil 2-0, with John Barnes scoring a brilliant solo goal and kind of announcing himself as on the world stage as a great footballer.
Yeah, that's a very famous goal, isn't it? That one of the all-time great England goals. Kind of up there with Gaza against Scotland in Euro '96
Yeah,
and others.
you'd absolutely say so. Yeah, I mean, a young black English player going and being the best player on the pitch in the Maracanã, it kind of just shows where society is changing as well. And I know the abuse that Barnes would have got around this time as well, but it
Yeah.
just kind of shows that shouldn't matter where you're from. You're playing for England. You should be supported, and this is what can happen if you are supported. Really.
There's a piece about the goal written in 2013, so an interview with John Barnes, but one of the lines in there is that describing the game itself, England were Brazil, Brazil were England, and at the centre of it all was a man who few outside of Watford knew much about. So there you go, a bit of a shock.
Yeah, absolutely. And England, we can't have nice things. So England follow this up with a 2-0 loss to Uruguay, and have a 0-0 draw with Chile. So pretty fitting, really, for England when they, kind of achieve, a pointless yet landmark victory, only to follow it with two disappointing results and end up leaving South America slightly less than when they arrived.
Yeah,
Even though that's the only thing anyone remembers is winning 2-0 against Brazil, the great Brazil team in the Maracanã.
it's
It's
like
still like actually the facts are a lot worse in the background.
it's like 2 steps forward, 4 steps back.
Yeah, but everyone only remembers the 2 steps forward. Everyone's got the
Yeah,
commemorative shirt of the 2 steps forward, haven't they? And England are only there because they didn't qualify for Euro 84 as well.
yeah, yeah. So what about Scotland then? Are they can't be as big of a draw on the world
Yeah,
stage?
they went on their own world tour. They're not to be outdone, playing three and winning three friendlies as well, but they were all against the Canadian national team. So totally normal. Just three friendlies against Canada
It,
back to back.
if there is a Is This Scotland podcast, they need to be looking at that. I'm jealous of them because if that was England, we would be auditioning the living shit out of that. Three
It,
games against Canada. I mean, it's like a series, isn't it? Which you don't see often in football.
but yeah, it was like, okay, we'll have three games against the same opposition, and whoever wins that gets this Maple Leaf Cup that they've invented. But
Yeah.
also, like, why three games? Was there surely like not anybody else? Like, surely we've covered we've done bits on like the Canadian Croatian League in the past. I remember we did something like that for
Yeah.
who the best team in America was around that time. Surely there's like more interesting teams in that area. I mean, again, even just playing Canada and the USA and someone else instead of three back-to-back prison sentences.
That's mad. That is. I don't think I've ever heard of anything like it. But do we know how they got on in those?
Yeah, they
Did we?
won. They won all
Oh
three.
yeah, they
So
won off.
so
Yeah,
they absolutely stuffed Canada. But it was like, who's learning anything from this? Like
yeah.
all this time of period, I'm amazed just hasn't been invested for like a scandal. Like, why
Yeah.
were these games being played? Like, what's the point in any of this? And I don't. There feels no point in this, but there is a point in the qualification for the next World Cup as we go on to this into the 1986 qualification route. Uh,
Okay.
in the winter of '85, England crack on with qualification, winning their first three games, drawing their next two, as we find them coming up to the start of the Rous Cup. Scotland in prep start with a 3-0 win over Iceland, followed by a 3-1 stuffing of Spain at Hampden Park. So they're kind of for out of the blue, just on the ascendancy again.
They're kind of Spanish bogey team.
Yeah, well, there's a few results we've seen in the past, haven't they? Especially like recently as well, where you kind of go, why are Scotland good against Spain?
Yeah.
Like it feels like that needs to happen at a tournament
Oh
for
God, yeah.
everyone to actually go, you know what, this like a band you've been listening to for years, and all of a sudden they've brought out Sex on Fire and everyone can see it now.
They don't have a bad record against them. I think I'm trying to figure out. I think they've had 14 games. Scotland and Spain.
Hmm.
Spain have won 6.
That's
Scotland
not
have won
bad.
4, and 4 have been drawn. So
I guess two of
closer
the
than you
ones
think.
two in recent that we talked about, one in actual recent memory and the one here. There is only 2 other wins for Scotland, isn't there? So maybe
Yeah,
not the sleeper hit we thought.
yeah. I was going to say actually that there's the one in March of this year, and then the one previous to that is the one you've just mentioned. So just the 40 years between the two there, but one
Great
win every
stuff.
40 years,
You
that's all
take
right.
you take that, yeah. Scotland in this qualification do start to fade though. They're losing their return game in Seville, as we kind of mentioned then, and then at home to Wales in 1985, because Wales are in their qualification group, and weirdly Northern Ireland are in England's as well. So they still
Mm.
just can't like that is an ex turning up at a party, isn't it? Just of like, here you've got the Rous Cup on. Hope you're happy.
Definitely. Oh dear. Well, let's see who's going to be happy by the end of the inaugural Rouse Cup.
Yeah, and we go into this is the first game of it. So yeah, England and Scotland can't be fucked to play Northern Ireland and Wales anymore. So instead want to play one another out of pure spite and tradition, which is essentially the same thing.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
as we mentioned, a yearly one-off game is devised to see who it really is the better nation. And the first game is in Scotland.
Mm.
And we've got the lineups. If you want to do you want to do England or Scotland?
I'll do England. If that's
Good.
okay. In goal, Peter Shilton. Defense, Viv Anderson, Terry Butcher, Terry Fenwick, and Kenny Sampson. Midfield, Glenn Hoddle, Ray Wilkins, Brian Robson, captain, and John Barnes. Up front, Trevor Francis and Mark Haitley. Notable bench warmers are Chris Waddle and Gary Lineker. This is the 600th match in England's footballing history. So there you go. Um,
A little
I
note, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit of discussion around the team. Perhaps I like that both our centre backs are called Terry.
Yeah, it felt there'd be a few more Terrys as we got on there. There's a Trevor, but I was hoping there was going to be at least one more Terry as we kind of got along.
And yeah, Viv Anderson right back. With Glenn Hoddle on the right. We've seen a bit of Hoddle, have we? Or have we seen Hoddle be snubbed?
Yeah, this is as we kind of go on in this little series, we start to get the Glenn Hoddle, how do you fit him in the team kind of
Mm.
vibe. We'll come on to it shortly during the game, but there is definitely a feeling of you just have to find a place for Glenn Hoddle, and then the other half of the country going, why is he playing Glenn Hoddle?
Especially when
So
you
I
got Chris Waddle on the bench as well.
Yeah, Waddle on the bench with Lineker, as you said as well. The Scotland team, you've got Jim Leighton, Richard Goff, Maurice Malpas, Roy Aitken, Alex McLeish, Willie Miller, Gordon Strachan, Graham Souness, Steve Archibald, Jim Bett, and David Speedy. So, first appearance on the pod for such notable names as Souness, Archibald, Strachan, and McLeish on the pod. Kind of Scotland greats along the way.
Yeah. One thing I like the name. I've never heard of David Speedy, but I like the
Mm,
name for a footballer. Um, I was watching the highlights for this game, and there's a funny bit of commentary. It was just obviously one of those interactions where it's just player names or whatever. He's like
mm.
Anderson to Butcher, Fenwick, Speedy, and I thought, why has he just stuck a nickname in there? Like I thought it was somebody called Speed.
It's usually like Ray Wilkins gets it, is it? Remember, he just gets randomly called Butch all the time by commentators.
Yeah, yeah, Butch.
We are in that pure period of Butch, aren't we here? Yeah, and yeah, this is kind of what you'd say is just after their disgusting prime. I'd say Scotland here. A lot of these players kind of in their peak or just
when
out.
you
And
when you say they're disgusting prime, do you mean the peak of how disgusting they were, or it was just a disgustingly good Scotland team and that
like a,
upsets you?
like I think it was a good Scotland team who were the better team in like the late 70s when England couldn't qualify for things. Scotland would,
Yeah.
and they would go to World Cups kind of thinking they had a chance. There was a period of that. I mean, Dalglish isn't in this game, which was quite disappointing as I was looking forward to seeing him. But He does start to miss more games over this period for Scotland too, but he's there on kind of the bigger occasions. So yeah, no Dalglish at this point, and the kits are worth discussion. Let's say Scotland's kit is like an almost black edition, like the
Yeah,
bluest black school socks you've ever seen in your life.
I quite like the Scotland kit. It's very basic, but I like it for that reason. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of got like a weird Reebok like white trim over it, which I'm not quite sure I'm a fan of. I think it's the stuff over the arms and into the neck that I'm not really a fan of. I think it's an Umbro kit, but yeah, it is so dark.
Yeah, I mean, England's kit. It's the one they wear at World Cup '86. I
Hmm.
think we can both agree that's quite a good England kit.
Yeah. I don't mind it at all. Yeah, a bit of a classic Umbro black neck as well with a bit of a light red trim, which yeah, I'm not against it.
I
What?
wonder whether this is the time when kits start to have a bit of character.
Hmm.
Like we might be right on the cusp for that because I think we've watched games from not too far before this, and they're still just like, that is a white jumper with its sleeves
Yeah.
cut off.
Yeah, that is a bib. They are wearing the Scotland bib at this point. Yeah. Yeah, and also one of the stills from the game, there's a Scotland player who looks like he played in like the very first England Scotland game. He looks
Yeah,
so like old timey.
it's like,
Like,
yeah, Freddie Mercury esque, really, but without all the flamboyancy.
so it's just a moustache then, basically. But he's like in the picture, which I'll definitely share. It's like he's pulling a face that's like he's got like a pipe's been photoshopped out of his mouth.
Yeah, he does. He looks like that guy, or like, the old wrestlers, the pictures where it's just a man with a massive chest and they're doing that sort of old
Yeah.
school fighting
The
stance.
grapple,
The yeah,
the
yeah,
grapple stance. Yeah,
yeah,
definitely. It definitely looks a bit old timey, doesn't it? Even though it's like the mid 80s here.
yeah. And England players are starting to have haircuts, I think.
Yeah, I think so. They could be defined as having hair, but yeah, and as we kind of had a look through the highlights of the game as well, you can tell when a game is either not very good or very Scotland v England is because it's on YouTube and no one really can be bothered to take it down. And
Yeah,
this game is both those things. It is not very good, but it is very Scotland v England.
we spoiled ourselves with the first Scotland England
The best
1967.
one.
Yeah, it really is. Well, I think it must be, unless there's one
Yeah,
with missed.
yeah, definitely. And in the build up, I think we always like to look at the build up of what like telly was like around then, and you get quite a good shot of what was happening. In the build up, Jimmy Hill is carrying out hosting duties for one TV channel, but he's in the comms booth with Motson during the game for another TV channel. So
That's weird.
doing my due diligence on this, I had to make sure that the content hungry Hill didn't like have to peg it back into the studio at half time because
Yeah,
surely if he's hosting on one TV channel, like say ITV, but he's doing the commentary, the co-comments with Motson for BBC, he can't be like at half time to go, right, thanks, John, and
he's the
just like
original high
running
performance
into the
Jake
next one.
Humphries,
High performance Jimmy Hill.
the Jimmy Hill podcast. Yeah.
I know,
So,
yeah.
so did you enjoy what you saw of the TV coverage beforehand?
Oh yeah,
It
it
was
was
quite
it
a unique one, I thought.
it was very interesting, wasn't it? Because I started looking, and so Hill doesn't run back for half time, but at half time instead, from the coverage I could find, and because I think this is the one that's got Scottish commentary over it as well. So I'm not sure who this was for. Again, we're getting into the whole Granada, ITV,
Yeah,
different areas, aren't we? But during this, I managed to find a lovely little person involved. It was our little boy, Terry Venables.
I know. Yeah. You know what? Well, he's also sat next to Bobby Charlton, isn't he?
Yeah, Bobby Charlton still keeping that comb over as well.
Getting
Like,
him in the studio feels bloody. Feels like a big deal.
yeah, you've
Obviously,
got
because
like the Knight of the Realm, Bobby Charlton, like still beloved to the world. All this, not that he's not now, but like a still like almost like a prominent figure in football. Like just having him on at half time is just like fucking hell, that's a good booking.
yeah, 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 because he's held in such reverence, obviously, these days and what have you. I can't. It'd almost be like getting Fergie in on Monday Night Football or something like
Yeah,
that. But probably I don't know. that would be a bigger deal because everything seems like a bigger deal these days because it's shouted about so much. But no, fair play to
Yeah, and
whoever was broadcasting this.
I know, yeah, we just it's no way of finding out as well. But I love they've got Terry Venables, fresh back off the plane from El España, which is great because Bob Wilson says the football has been fast, furious, bookings, all sorts of things. I don't think the Spanish football, Terry, and it's like
Yeah.
you just don't get that, like, because I couldn't remember in this period whether Venables is managing or still playing, as
It looked
he doesn't look a definable age.
no, it's his hair. I've
Yeah,
never seen him with hair like that. Like
it is.
it's like you've just got out the shower and used a hairdryer for some random reason, and it's like it's proper. He also gives me a bit Ray Winston vibes in
Oh,
this,
he
like a
looks
young,
so much like a young Ray Winston here. Does it? Again, this is another photo I will definitely be sharing because this is the important stuff. In the we got over the Odyssey of McLaren kind of goal line by just talking so much about like Shearer and like
yeah,
his next suits and ties and all that. But like again, Venables here looks like a minor Only Fools and Horses character who like befriends Rodney.
yeah. Dell
So,
wouldn't
so
like him, would he?
no,
Told you
not
not to hang around with that bloody Terry
yeah,
Venables.
he's too flashy. He is. I definitely feel like Venable's got a mention on Only Fools at some point as well. Like he
Oh, he
feels like he
must.
was like in the zeitgeist for that. But for about the thousandth time on the podcast, I went on Terry Venable's Wikipedia page. I think it must be just like on a favorites from now on. The amount of like we end up just going on there. But at this point, he was managing Barcelona. So yeah, no doubt bringing back some hooky trench coats on his way too.
80 years old now. He is old Tell.
Old Tell, yeah. Again, kind of like a bit of a forgotten great of English football, really. He played for England, he managed England. He was, a really, thought after manager. He's clearly managing fucking Barcelona here. But
Yeah.
that's like a mad booking itself for this studio. They've managed to get the Barcelona manager to come over during an international break.
It's right. Well, that's the power of the Rous Cup. So I was just Googling Terry Venables,
As
and
we
then
do.
I went on to the news tab on Google. The second story was from CNN, and it was 23rd of June this year. Venables says no to Newcastle offer. Former England national coach Terry Venables has turned down an offer to become caretaker manager at troubled Newcastle United.
What?
I know. So I've gone on, and it appears that CNN, which I think we can all agree is a globally known
Mainstream media.
news network, and they've decided in June of 2023 to publish an article from about 15 years ago. I think it's around 2008 about Terry Venables potentially replacing Kevin Keegan. Now, is that Venables purring using new media to try and just
Oh
get his
my
name out there? You know, a bit of a
fucking
SEO campaign.
is that what we were still doing around this point? It was Kevin Keegan. Is he going to be replaced by Terry Venables? Like
He
it's
just
such
looms,
England
doesn't he?
manager Tom Bowler, isn't it?
Yeah. And we got old Bobbert Robson in charge as well. Anyway, do we do we want to move past Eltel? Or do we, well, I'm happy to stay with him, to be honest.
If we have to, yes, I think that's fair. So yeah, more about the actual game now as we start to look across this now.
No.
Yeah, if you just want
Boo.
more Venables, maybe he'll come back up. Who knows?
Oh yeah.
Um,
He'll make sure of that.
Yeah, in the early, there's an early Trevor Francis shot that kind of thrashes across the goal, and Jimmy Hill says that was the old Trevor Francis, the one that we'd love to see again. Like he's talking about Francis like he's some sort of like clapped out old steam train who doesn't run on whatever they used before coal. It's
Well,
just
you know
like,
where my
what on
mind
earth?
went. You know where my mind went when I heard that's the old Trevor Francis.
Absolutely, of course it does.
Big Vince McMahon. Just to confirm for the listener there. I mean,
Yeah,
that's about the fourth or fifth wrestling reference of this episode.
I know. Yeah, it's just seeped into our minds, hasn't it? It's the heat. It's centered us mad.
Yep, it's SummerSlam.
Yeah. It's so Hill is on commentary for that. It's really strange at this period as well. When Francis beats his man and gets a shot away, it's highlighted like something didn't really spot until that. The Scotland shorts are insane in this
Yeah,
game.
they look ripped as well, don't they? I thought
They
as go on, you've got
yeah,
a deeper analysis.
well, they just look so odd because you can see that there's a design on the shorts is white. So there's like they've got white shorts, but there's like a dark navy ribbon across the cock and the arse.
Sorry, just laughing at cock and arse.
Well, it's exactly what it is, and it looks like a Scotland player has got like their shorts pulled down and they've got black pants on show, but they've got like a white undershirt tucked into the pants,
Yeah.
and they're all just like they're all very ill or very on a special holiday or something, and they just look so strange. Like it was putting me off for the whole game when I was watching it.
Yeah, and at the end, that was the first time I noticed was at the end when the players were kind of walking off the pitch. The bottom of the short looks kind of ripped. It's not like a straight line.
Mm.
Yeah, very strange.
It
Almost
it
like
go it goes up the outside of the leg, doesn't it? Like that's how
when you
it's
like
cut.
used to cut like fold a piece of paper in half and then cut lines into it and then take it out and it looked like a flower or something like that. Do you
Yeah.
ever? They kind of look like that. They tried to do that sort of thing. Not practical. But yeah,
No, just maybe the strangest shorts we've ever seen on the podcast. Let's probably agree with that. I mean, because
yeah,
we've never noticed any shorts before.
that's true.
Never noticed any. Yeah, there isn't a great deal of chances in the version that I've watched anyway. One of the more notable moments is Viv Anderson intercepts a pass in front of England's penalty area and managed to run the entire length of the pitch before being taken out. No
Mad.
card was given.
Yeah, and that tackle, like, I so the run was really really cool to see. I was like, yes, go on, go on. I thought he's probably not going to do it because I would have heard about this here,
Mm,
but the tackle is well, one, it's very much from behind.
yeah.
Like we can agree on that at the very least. And then he's going to the and then I thought this is England Scotland in the 80s. It's not going to be a red card. And then he's
Mm,
almost saying to the ref, no, 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 you know. And I thought, is he trying to say it's not even a yellow? And then
yeah.
the commentator's gone, well, he's trying to say it's not a yellow, but the referee's got the card, and it's like, oh, he's put the card back. No
And
card
put the
given.
card back. Put like so
Yeah.
he's been talked out of giving him a yellow card in this game, like just
And
through
then
Scottish charm.
And then I thought, well, was it a perfect tackle from behind? And then you watch it and he doesn't get anywhere near the ball.
But
Crazy.
but it's also not like when he was going on that run, and I know it's England Scotland in the 80s. I was just wincing the entire time he was running, just going, "Oh, someone's gonna absolutely smash into him." And when the tackle comes, it's a bit. It's he doesn't leather into him. It's just like this is a professional foul. It's like the first professional foul that was ever given, and it's like clearly a yellow. But I thought it was going to be like a studs up. You are going no further,
Yeah.
and it was just more clinical when it
Yeah,
came,
yeah.
and it was just like you're gone.
It wasn't violent. It didn't intend to break any bones.
Yeah,
Which we
it
can
was
all be
just
thankful
legally,
for.
yeah, legally this had to happen to stop you scoring. I mean, and from that, England have like a free kick that they try and work, and it just nothing happens at all. And then kind of shortly after that, we do have a goal. Actually, the goal itself comes on 68 minutes. Richard Gough with a header from Jim Bett, great Scottish name. Unsure who the England player is who's basically on the floor when Gough kind of beats him to the header, but it's like he's already falling over by the time Gough is jumping,
Yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
is great to see as well. But yeah, it's a good kind of looping header from about like if a header can be looping from 6 yards out, this is it.
Yeah. Well, it's the goal that decides the game. So let's have a listen and yeah, and hear the sort of the goal itself and I guess the aftermath.
It's operating there. Here's Richard Gough. It's wide and beautifully touched in now. Bent. Is the header going to be on? It is. It's there. Richard Gough has scored for Scotland. Oh, what a superb effort by the big Dundee United player. Look at that. Watch the way he came in. And the ball from this angle seemed to drift agonizingly and slowly but inexorably in. So we're now half a minute into injury time. And there it goes, the final whistle. Scotland have won the Sir Stanley Rous Trophy. The beginning of a new era of international international football with the British Home Championships finished, and there is the man who will imprint his name on this game and this event, if not on the cup, for that gloriously headed goal. And if we are watching a rain-sodden scene, it will be for the Scots a memorable afternoon as Sir Stanley Rous comes out to present the cup to Graham Souness.
Okay. Well, that's a
Victorious.
disappointing start to the Rous Cup for me.
Oh yeah, this isn't good for England at all. But Scotland victorious in the first game, and probably a good thing
Probably a good thing for the tournament itself, so it doesn't
for the
seem like a foregone
prestige
conclusion.
of the Rous Cup. Yeah, because you feel like if England would have won this first game, knowing the rivalry, now we've looked a bit more back and kind of both teams and all that stuff. You feel like England would have like just retired from the Rous Cup as well. Like they'd have gone, right,
Yeah.
no more Rous Cup. We've won this. Like we've got this trophy back in ours now because we can never have the home championships again. It was like they were playing their own kind of dirty trick, maybe.
yeah, but they didn't get away with it.
No, not at all. No, and amazingly, straight after the game, and I mean, as the game has finished, they are setting up the trophy kind of presentation straight away, and
This
the
is the-
players haven't even left the field. Some of them are like just swapping shirts, and there is already a trophy on a trestle table with a cloth over it, ready to be handed out to the players.
This
It's
is the
so
least.
quick.
It's very efficient, definitely, and it's the least glamorous trophy presentation. I mean, just basically 4 old blokes in trench coats just hobble onto the pitch, looking fuming, and stand there with a table, like you say.
It's amazing, isn't it? And whose music do we hear to run in? It is only Stanley Rous himself who comes to present the trophy, which is so good. And he's accompanied by, I think he's got 4 or 5 mates with him, and they've all seemingly bought coats of Venables at half time.
Yeah,
Like they've all got the exact same Macs on, apart from one of them who's got like a white Mac on, and he's like, as he comes onto the pitch, he just like pops the collar up.
yeah. But well, it's hooky gear, isn't it? It definitely is.
Yeah, it looks they've all bought that in a big jumble sale, and you feel like the guy who's got the white one just wants to stand out at his local conservative club.
Yeah, but he's recently divorced.
Yeah,
He's
oh yeah, definitely
got a
recently
fancy
divorced.
trench coat to
Yeah,
pull.
I've got to look good on TV when I'm supporting Stan. But I don't know if Rouse has got somewhere else to be. But from the final whistle, it takes under 2 minutes from Souness to have the trophy in his hand. Like this is the
Yeah.
most like just getting on with it, and I can't tell if this is like peak FIFA delegate behavior or he'd like be expelled for like not taking enough time to earn his money.
Yeah, I don't know. I think he's kind of a law unto himself here, and everyone's a little bit scared of him.
Well, I think with that, it's because you see, like when you get like the Champions League and the Europa League like draws, they go on for literally days,
Yeah,
and like that
Black
is
Eyed
UEFA
Peas.
trying. Yeah, Black Eyed Peas playing. There's got to be some like, wasn't there like a classical music version of the Champions League theme played during
Yeah.
the draw recently? And you just
Yeah.
think, who's this for?
It's for the people who've organised it to make themselves feel better.
And also to justify their 2-day per diem when they could just do all of the fixtures in essentially like an hour. They could
Yeah.
just do all the draws, but they like put it over 2 days. So that to me is like peak football delegate, kind of just drawing it out. Rouse is having none of this. He's just on the pitch. Yep, just hand this whole shit out and just carry on with it.
Yeah. What do you make of Rous? I think like if you just judged him by like body language and the way he is in this, you leave me a bit cold.
Mate, I think he's in his 90s. I mean, he looks fucking great for 90 around this period.
Yeah. He
The
was
fact that he is like on his own walking onto the pitch, like of like he's 90 in the 80s, which is kind of like 170 in armor on like new money,
very true. Very true.
which
Yeah.
which is
I think
which
it's
is
just the coat and
amazing.
the shades.
I think the shades is harsh, isn't it? Like maybe he needs them, but this is May in
Scotland.
Glasgow. Like he probably it looks like it's just raining constantly as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
which is great. But in fairness, there is an amazing clip where Rouse is like handing out the medals and he's kind of waiting for handshakes off all the Scotland players as he's handing them out. Like no runners up medals back here. England just don't even get seen again. But
Well, go on, carry on, carry on.
well, I was just going to say, because as Strachan walks up, he lifts the trophy and doesn't even look at Rouse as he's doing it. He lifts it up and Rouse like has his hand like stretched out as Strachan lifts the trophy, and Rouse realizes he isn't getting a handshake back. So
You
instead,
know,
he just sticks his thumb out and goes jog on to Strachan, which is amazing.
but does this change your opinion of that in knowing this fact that Rouse was an active Freemason?
So he needed the handshake.
He was trying to recruit Strachan maybe with the special handshake, and Strachan was having none of it.
I just the way that you just see him, he's got his hand out, and then immediately he just waits there for like 0.3 of a second, and he
Yeah.
realizes he's getting nothing back, and he's like, "Right, you fuck off. Next one, next Scottish man in front of me, please."
It is good. It is good. He was 90 at the time, and he died at 91 years of age. He's
Bloody hell.
buried in Lickey Hills, which is sort of
Oh, okay.
Birminghamish.
That's in the Midlands, isn't it? Yeah, I've been to there. I probably may even go there today. Who knows?
Well, go and have a look.
I know. Yeah,
Pilgrimage.
I'll have a look for old Rouse, but yeah, that's kind of the last bit we see on the pitch. But in the aftermath for England, Bob Wilson says it's gone against England, so therefore it's gone against Glenn Hoddle, which
Yeah.
is an interesting thing to take away straight from the game of, well, Hoddle, he's the problem, or it's Glenn Hoddle's fault, or it's England's fault because they pick Glenn Hoddle. It seems funny. That's the first thing that's kind of thought about after the game.
It must have been seen as like this is it now for Hoddle. This is the start of like you this is your, you're not, I'm presuming he's not like a newcomer to the squad at this time, and he's kind of
Hmm.
not past it either. So he's kind of in his
No, yeah,
peak. We're maybe just
he's.
pinning all of our hopes to him. Maybe he had a
I
good
think,
start to the
yeah.
season or a good year.
He's the kind of like the informed player. This is kind of his peak at Spurs around this time, I think, as well. And because England never played with that number 10 around this period, definitely not. That's why Hoddle could never really find a place. But this is kind of like maybe the earliest thing of you've just got to find a place for him in the team, which we hadn't seen yet. Maybe this is the first time we've seen it in England.
Yeah, maybe,
Like
maybe.
a player has been born and made just so anti-English. We don't really know how to treat them, and that happens in loads of other occasions going forward. But yeah, that was something that stood out. And then something else really strange happens straight after. So apparently there have been 26 Scottish fans from Lothing who travelled to Wembley for the game, despite it being played in Scotland.
That's a
Odd.
mistake. Yeah.
Yeah, you'd imagine weird. This was seen as an act of protest to the game being switched venues. They don't really give any details for that, but so I'm assuming the game was supposed to take place in England first. These people had just booked their train tickets or decided they were going anyway, and they've just gone instead of going to this game.
It's so dumb.
I
This
don't
is
understand it.
also very like, and finally on today's news, when they're just,
Oh,
it's
yeah,
some
it is.
novelty story.
There is a reason that this is the last thing that's on the broadcast, or I don't get why these people cared anyway. But the 26 Scottish fans brought down a TV and they set up outside Wembley to watch the game. But being 1985, the TV needed mains power, so the TV just sits there with drinks and tinnies on top of it, and you can't see any of the game.
For missing the game to sit outside Wembley and look at a telly that's not switched on and get pissed.
Yeah, it.
You
I
couldn't
mean,
make it up. Only the
well,
bloody Rous Cup, eh?
I know, yeah, these Rous Cup fanatics, you're just taking a different way of it. There's a bottle of Buckfast on the top of the TV as well, just in case people didn't realise they were Scottish.
Yeah.
And I love as well in one of the stills, like everyone is clearly like decked out and all that. There is a guy on the right hand side who looks like he's like a friend of a friend who's just had to go along for the journey. He's wearing
Yeah.
like what looks like a really old, it's probably just a jumper, but it looks like an old Scottish top.
Yeah, it does,
Like
doesn't it?
it's
It's
like a blue one, but he's just got his arms crossed as everyone's just like pissed up with flags, shouting and cheering, and he just looks like, God, why? I didn't want to be on TV.
it's almost like a vicar's collar, what he's got on there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
He's got a bit of a vicar. He's a bit horse rider.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That sums it up perfectly, actually.
He's
Yeah.
he's quite jockey-esque, and you even get like a performative cheer, apparently, as they pretend that they've seen the Goff goal.
Yeah. So that's the producer going, right, 1, 2, 3, big show. Yeah.
Whoa, yeah, like that, and they just look like an absolute load of tits. I mean, this truly is the greatest rivalry in football history. We've got people just doing that, and then right at the last bit, Bob Wilson says bringing a TV to the ground which couldn't be watched is a bit Irish, which we'll end on there really in terms of
Classic.
what was allowed to be said then and what that means. But Jesus Christ, what on earth has gone on here?
So
Just
I think it's worth kind of recapping that we're not just covering that game today. That's not the type of show this is today. This is the Rous Cup and everything around it. And we've looked at the legacy of the Home Nations Championships, the birth of the Rous Cup, the inaugural Rous Cup, and that's kind of where we are, as Nick says, at the end of chapter 1. Would you say a successful start for the Rous Cup? Yeah.
yeah, I think it's right Scotland won the first one, because if England would have won it, they'd probably just said, "Oh, we're not interested anymore. We'll just keep this." And it's always better, really, for the rivalry if what is seen as the smaller underdog nation is kind of more successful than the
Yeah.
one who's kind of had all the backing, all the funding, all like a lot of the, again, who wouldn't say real history, but I
Mm.
guess who are seen as the dominant one to be punched up at.
Yeah. So I don't think we should give any spoilers as to what's coming next, but let's just say it definitely goes in a direction where I didn't expect it to go,
No.
considering where we started. Is there anything else that you want to add, Nick, or do we leave them hanging there for next time?
I think just leave them hanging there for next time. We'll be back with more Rouse Cup content. And yeah,
Soon.
we'll just see where this weird little period and tournament takes us.
Spot on. Thank you everyone for listening.